Welcome back. A proposed new state law could have a significant impact on the dining scene in New York City. The proposed legislation aims to raise the minimum wage for waiters and bartenders. Andrew Rigie, the executive director of the NYC Hospitality Alliance, joins me to discuss the potential implications of this law for restaurant owners, servers, and customers. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Now, as I mentioned, there's a proposed bill looking to raise wages for restaurant workers. Can you give us a little bit more information about the bill?
Yeah, restaurant workers like servers, bartenders who customarily receive tips are paid in a different way. It's called the tip credit structure. I'm sure most people, if you've been to a restaurant, you tip, you are somewhat familiar with it, but it's a little bit more complex on the backside. The easiest way for like a non-restaurant person to understand it is it's kind of like a commission sales job where if you're a server or bartender, you get paid a base wage plus a commission, which in this case is a tip. And it also, or I should say always must equal or exceed the full minimum wage, which in New York City is $16 right now. But what would do is the proposal would eliminate this tip credit that allows those tips, at least part of them, to be used as the wage to make the base minimum wage. So it's a little bit complicated, but it has real big implications for restaurants because if it was eliminated, it would cost a lot of money and could impact how people are or how much people are earning.
Now, when you mentioned it's kind of for non-restaurant people, it's a lot. I definitely have to like expand on that because I think that if you're not in this world, it's just like so different. Just the way we talk about wages and money is very different in the restaurant world. What has the response been like from those who are restaurant owners or workers?
So restaurant owners are extremely concerned. Running a small business in New York City is really, really tough. And during the pandemic, it got even tougher. And we saw so many small businesses shutter, so many still have pandemic era debt. So the cost of eliminating the tip credit for small businesses would be astronomical. So they think it could put them out of business, they'd have to lay employees off. And a lot of tipped workers are also concerned because, they want their jobs, they want to be employed, depending on where you work, the type of restaurant you work, the amount you're earning definitely can vary a lot. But, if you're at a job and you're making money, you certainly are concerned with a government policy that could potentially impact you if it could have negative consequences. And this is one of those things where it's tough to know what exactly would happen. So I think there is a lot of concern among both folks. And like everything else, there's a lot of different opinions.
Now, as you mentioned, many restaurant owners fear that the bill could lead to potential layoffs. But as somebody outside of this, I'm curious to know, is there any validity to that concern? And, why is this something that they're foreseeing?
Yeah, well, so actually the timing here in an unfortunate way kind of helps. Last May it was, Washington, D.C. began eliminating their tip credit, which is what this New York State proposal would do. And since last May, I think D.C. has lost over 3,000 jobs in the full-service restaurant industry, where they're starting to eliminate the tip credit. And the surrounding counties that didn't eliminate the tip credit actually stayed the same or saw an increase. And when you compare that in D.C. to limited service restaurants, like when you go up to the counter, and I know because of the pandemic, a lot of people are used to tipping for their coffee and everything, but
Yeah.
those restaurants where you didn't traditionally tip, they didn't see the same loss. So, if you're just looking at DC, there's real reason to be concerned because thousands of jobs have been lost.
Now, you mentioned something that was really interesting, and I know that many people have experienced this, and it's, after the pandemic, people turning around, the little things so
Yeah.
that you can pay tips. Can you talk about tipping culture and, how it's been since the pandemic?
Yeah, I think early on our, restaurant workers were like essential workers. And people wanted to be as generous as they could. Obviously, they were working in really difficult circumstances with public health and everything. So people were being really generous. But what ended up happening was it kind of got ingrained in the restaurant industry. Like when you would go at a sit-down restaurant, you'd be used, it would be custom to tip. But, like old school, you go to a coffee shop and you pay at a counter, if you had some extra change, maybe you put it in the tip jar. But technology changed it where it could flip it around and you tip. And obviously, it becomes very difficult once people start making more money and getting used to tipping for all of a sudden restaurants to kind of take it away. So I think, at least what I've heard, is when people are sitting down at a full service restaurant and tipping, that's always kind of been part of the culture. But more of the concern has been, or things that sometimes people don't love, is like, okay, every time I'm going to go and pay something at the counter, why am I expected to tip? And sometimes the tip's like as much as the cup of coffee or whatever it is you're ordering. But when it comes to this tip credit issue, it needs to be really clear that we're not talking about, the limited service, flipping around the screen tipping. We're talking about the tip credit that's applied in a full service restaurant when you're sitting down and someone's actually coming to your table and taking your order and bringing you your food.
Now, in a survey from your organization, 76% of restaurant owners say they would increase menu prices if the bill went through. Is this a necessary adjustment? And if so, why?
Yeah, so it could cost about $12,000 per full-time tipped employee if the tip credit was eliminated. So you could think of even a small restaurant that had, 5 full-time tipped employees. I mean, you're talking about tens of thousands, getting close to, $100,000 a year more. And, a lot of small business owners, if they're even making that, they're lucky. So if they had to increase prices to offset that, that means prices are going to go up a lot. And I mean, anyone that goes out and eats anything, you don't have to go to a fancy restaurant, just a casual restaurant, it's a lot, especially if you want to go on a date or take your family out. So, one of the problems with this proposal, it doesn't only impact restaurant owners and workers, but it can make it a lot more expensive for the everyday person to just go out and get a quick meal.
Now, I'm curious to know, 42% said that they would consider eliminating tipping to keep costs down. But if tipping comes from customers, why is there a need to eliminate this?
Yeah, so what we've also seen around, the country where this movement has happened or it's been considered is kind of going back to what I was saying. If restaurants have to increase their prices so much, they don't want to then say, hey, customer, not only are we raising our prices so much, but now you have to still tip on top of that. Customers are going to be scared away. Not everyone has enough money to just, pay 10% more in prices and leave a 20% tip. So what restaurants have said is, what, I just raise my menu prices and tell the customer that they're no longer expected to tip. But what would happen then is that a restaurant worker would just become like a retail worker where they're paid, a straight hourly wage, let's just say, $17 an hour, $18 an hour, but they don't earn the tips that can bring them up to $20 or $20+ an hour, which is why a lot of people work in this industry as a server, as a bartender. Yes, you get the base wage, but you're really working for the extra money in tips.
Now, I want to talk about the other side of that. Many say that this could eliminate bias when it comes to tipping culture, ensuring that all workers are paid fairly. And I want to mention that Assembly member Jessica Gonzalez Rojas says that women of color are tipped much less than their white or male counterparts. Can you just talk a little bit more about that? Do you foresee this possibly eliminating that bias when it comes to tipping?
See, that's one of the big problems that people are either misleading people or they're saying something that hasn't been fully thought out. The tip credit has nothing to do with tipping it themselves. I've read a lot of different studies, and you could have arguments on both sides that people earn tips based on different factors: the color of your skin, your weight, how you're dressed. All of these different factors play into how much someone may leave you a tip. But what they're saying is, let's eliminate the tip credit, but let's keep tipping. So in my mind, if you're basically saying tipping has all these societal ills and outcomes and disparities, but we should keep tipping, you're actually kind of perpetuating the problem that you're trying to get rid of. The tip credit, by eliminating it, makes menu prices go up, makes restaurants struggle, and could result in workers getting fewer hours or even losing their job. But it does nothing to get at the disparities that you're referring to, which would be to eliminate tipping, pay everyone the same hourly wage, because then tipping won't influence it, and everyone in theory at least is being treated equally in that sense. But every time the conversation comes up, like, oh, maybe we should eliminate tipping to address this stuff, tipped workers of all different backgrounds come out and say, no, 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 I want to earn my tips. So it's a complex issue. There's a lot of strong opinions and a lot of good points on each side, but I think you have to look at it at the totality, and that would say keep the tip credit, but then try to work and address some of the issues that you just raised.
And I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because I don't think there's like a one size fits all approach. There's so many members in this industry, and in ways, customers are kind of a part of the industry, not really to the same effect, but we're a part of that bubble or that ecosystem, and there's just so many moving parts. From your experience working in this field, what do you think is the best approach to this situation?
I think restaurants are really a reflection of kind of culture and society at large. People from all different backgrounds, all different neighborhoods work in them. So many people at some point in their life have worked in a restaurant. And I think businesses need to have the flexibility to operate in a way that works for their own business, as long as they're following all the different laws. They're paying the minimum wage, they're paying overtime, they're following, various different laws. But I think when government in particular comes in and tries to really start to micromanage how this complex and large industry operates, it ends up having a lot of different ramifications. And while maybe there's some winners, there can also be a lot of different losers as well. So I think keeping the tip credit, keeping that system in place makes the most sense. And we need to support our small businesses, because just like cultural institutions and parks and all these other amazing entities, restaurants are also part of that social and also economic fabric in New York that people love, and that makes it so special.
Now, where can people go to just learn more about you and the work that you're doing?
Our website is the nycalliance.org. I'm on Twitter at Andrew Rigie, Instagram Political Foodie. I try to talk about politics and food and the intersection of all of them.
Well, I appreciate you for coming here. One in person that's a great
Yes.
moment to have, but just to really talk about this, because I think it's not something that a lot of consumers really think about, and initially I thought, well, yeah, that's great, like to raise it, but I didn't even think about all the adverse effects it could have on the restaurant owners and the workers themselves. So thank you so much for joining us and clarifying that.
Yeah, and I would say two quick things for you. Is one, that everyone should know that restaurant workers, tipped workers in New York, are required by law to earn the minimum wage. No one is legally earning less than. And the second one is, thank you for having me on throughout the pandemic. You've been doing such great work and reporting on so many important issues in the Bronx.
Thank you so much. We've come to the end of our show today. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us, and you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you miss any part of today's show, you can catch the Recable cast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Fios Channel 33, or watch anytime on the web at BronxNet.org. You can catch a brand new episode of Open with Darren Jaime on Wednesday and with Rena Valentine on Friday. I'm Kibin Alleyne, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.